Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, where this week we had a once-in-a-lifetime snowstorm deliver almost a foot of snow across the farm. So we're going to be giving you a full tour of the property, including the majestic Cedar Falls that looks pretty incredible coated with snow. And keep in mind, this is not only the first snow for us here with these ponds, but also the first time that all of the wildlife that live on this farm have ever experienced snow. Let's just say we've got some pretty entertaining clips. And I've always heard that fish bite really good while it's snowing, so we're going to be testing that theory out. So it's time to kick back and relax and enjoy some of these beautiful sights that nature has created. And we've also got a new eagle that showed up, so we're going to be seeing some turf wars. So I'll just have to preface this video with, I know that a lot of you northerners are like, what's the big deal? It's just snow, we see it all the time. But for us that live in the deep south, the reason we make such a big deal is because it's most likely the only time in our lives that we'll ever experience snow like this. In fact, the last time we got snow like this in this area was 110 years ago. So these events really do only come around once in a lifetime. And our farm is located in South Alabama, and we've never had snow here since we've owned the farm. So I gotta admit, this is a special treat, especially around Cedar Falls with those flowing waterfalls. I can't wait to see how this turns out. And the low for the next 2 nights is projected to be 13 degrees. So there is a chance that some of the water in the ponds will freeze over. But it started snowing around noon and got pretty heavy within a couple hours. And we're happy to see it sticking even on places like Alcatraz Island. And here's a look at the new shop we're building. All construction came to a halt, as you can see all the lumber stacked out there covered in snow. But I set up a few different time lapses around the farm, so we'll be able to watch as this snow progresses. And I found it interesting watching the snow try to cover the dock. And I'm guessing that the cracks in between the wood were melting the snow, so the dock was one of the last things to get covered. And as I mentioned, this is the very first snow we've had here at the farm, so that means all the wildlife that live here have never experienced snow. And as the snow is falling, the deer are getting up on their feet. I don't blame them. One of the little fawns that we call Dasher is actually eating the snow and out playing around in it in the middle of the day. And we got one brave doe here that's crossing the creek. You know that's got to be cold. But we had an interesting flock of birds that flew in with the storm that I've never seen around here before. And maybe some of you guys can identify them, but they landed on our bird cam feeder and were pecking through the ice and snow to get what food was left. And our ducks that we call Echo and Romeo, they don't mind the cold weather at all. And their duck house behind them's even covered in snow. And now here's a look at the squirrel house cam. The mouse that we call Gus Gus is having a tough time getting through the door with all the accumulation. But later in the video, you're going to see a close encounter of what I call basically an episode of Tom and Jerry. A new cat showed up to the squirrel house, which is 25 feet up in an oak tree. And we're going to see how Gus Gus's fate turns out later in the video. And we got some more whitetail action down by the creek. There's something majestic about whitetails walking in snow. We got the raccoon coming down out of the tree. And if you watch his paws, you can see him filling out the snow. Not sure what to think about it. And we had a little young buck that was considering crossing the creek. And then he thought a little bit better. I don't blame you, buddy. And this is our little kingfisher buddy that's always a regular out here at the pond. He's probably not too happy that the snow is interfering with his hunting. And one of the original members of the Crimson Oak farm, the owl that we call Hooter, flying up on the Eagle Tower and sitting there all the way until sunrise, not sure what to make of all the snow. But here's another quick time lapse. You can see the timestamp up in the top left corner, and the snow started around 10 o'clock in the morning and progressed throughout the day, and we were initially expecting to only get around 2 to 3 inches, but it became blizzard-like conditions and the snowstorm just sat right on top of the farm. And after about 8 hours of snowing, everything had gotten fully covered, but I'm most interested to see how Cedar Falls turns out. Because I've seen some of the videos from Greg and Ed at their Aquascape headquarters in St. Charles. Whenever it snows and the ponds freeze over and they even have frozen waterfalls, it looks incredible. But my first thought is that I hope we can keep the power on, which will keep these pumps running and churning that water, and make it a lot harder to freeze. And the bottom part of Cedar Falls I'm not so worried about because it's 5 to 6 feet deep, so all the fish can survive. But the top part up here at the wetland filter, it might freeze over at the surface, and that's where our little buddy Truman's hanging out. So for his sake, I hope we don't lose power. And here's a good shot of the waterfalls. You can already tell that as water's starting to splash around, it's starting to freeze on the wood and make icicles. Man, I can't wait to see how this turns out tomorrow. But now let's check in and see what the fish think about the snowstorm. I just saw one of them dart off there on the bottom left, but even though the water's crystal clear, this snow is making the visibility almost zero, so we'll have to come back and check on these guys tomorrow. One more little quick look at the outline around the pond. It's almost completely covered all the wood up. And there we go, we're starting to see our first signs of freezing water right here in these little shallow pockets around the outside where we don't have a lot of water flow. And here's another good look at the wetland filter. And although it looks shallow, there's about 6 feet of water and gravel, so that may also help keep it from freezing. But good luck tonight, Truman. And I think the birds and waterfowl are enjoying the snow the most. And they even have the little duck house to go into if they get tired of it. The eagle nest is almost completely full. I'm not sure what would have happened if there would have been babies in there, but I'm sure there's several eagle nests that are occupied right now in this area. So I'm guessing that the mama and daddy eagle fly in and cover the nest up to protect the little ones. Not really sure. Alright, only got about 30 minutes of daylight left, but they're still predicting a few more inches of snow tonight. So one last look at the Crimson Oak Blizzard of 2025. And now we got to check in on where all this got started, the backyard pond, home of Moby, the most aggressive bass in the world. And you can already see that the cold temps and snow have killed off a lot of the tropical vegetation we had around the pond, and even knocked over our big umbrella, and in hindsight, we should have folded that down. But even though the waterfall's still flowing, you can already see that it's starting to freeze over in this shallow pocket. And this pond is a good bit shallower than Cedar Falls, so I'm going to check back in tomorrow and see if it completely freezes over. So there's one last thing I had to do before it stopped snowing, and that's do a little fishing. And it's a little counterintuitive because you would think fish would be too cold to eat, but they're programmed that whenever that barometric pressure starts dropping, they feed heavily right before and during the storm. Alright folks, we're about to do the first ever snow fishing out here at the Crimson Oak Pond. And if it keeps getting a little colder tonight, it might be ice fishing tomorrow. It's going to get down to about 13 degrees tonight, but I've always heard that fish bite really good in the snow, so we're about to find out. And as you all know, we scan every fish we catch to see if it's been caught before, and if it has not, we'll insert this pit tag so we can keep track of them in our database and see how big they get over the years. This is one of those things I'm not a big fan of. Whenever you're fishing during below freezing temps, the pond water that's on the line actually freezes before you can even reel the line in. And about once every minute, you have to dip your fishing pole down in the water to clear out those frozen eyes. So it does add a new level of difficulty. Got him. Good one too. Big one in the snow. Let's go. Oh, a giant. Wow. Let's go. Look at the snow bass. That is a big fish. Wow. That is incredible. Look at that. Out here in the snow. Wow. Gotta love it. Alright, this fish has been caught. 570502. Alright, this fish weighs 3.52. Man, you gotta love it. That's why you go fishing in the snow. So this fish is named Odin and was one of the original 2-inch bass that we stocked in the pond. And this is the 4th time we caught the fish. And if you notice on the location column, the very first time we ever caught him back in 2023 was in this exact same spot right here by the drain pipe. And then the other spot we caught him was north of the island, which is only about 20 to 30 feet away from the drain pipe. So Odin lives right here in this area and pretty much never leaves. Now I made a big mistake. I got my hands wet grabbing and releasing that fish. Whew. Now they're frozen. Alright, I'm going to continue fishing, but you'll see more of that later in the video. Alright, one last snow lapse right here at the Eagle Tower. If you missed our last video, we had a new eagle show up and actually inspected the nest area, which was a promising sight. Hopefully we'll have a pair move in soon. Alright, we're out here the next morning, and our grand total of snow is 11 inches. And I'm pretty sure that breaks all the records. That's why I mentioned it was a once-in-a-lifetime event, because I think as long as they've been keeping records of the amount of snowfall, we've never gotten that much in this area. And it may be more than 100 years before we ever have that event happen again, which is wild. The ducks are the only ones out playing in it this morning, but the wait is finally over. Let's go see the results of Cedar Falls. So just off the beach area, we do have a little bit of frozen water, but luckily the power stayed on all night, and all the pumps kept the water flowing, which kept most of it from freezing. But look at how incredible the waterfall area looks. It's like everything is freshly powder coated and perfectly placed right there. Man, that's beautiful. Kind of makes me want to go skiing. So it didn't get cold enough to freeze anything over. Everything's still flowing pretty smooth. But we do have some jumbo icicles. After long days out here at the farm, it's important to stay hydrated. And in our previous videos, you've seen the drink mix hydration packs, but Element is excited to announce a new way to stay hydrated with Element Sparkling. And it offers the same zero sugar electrolyte formulation, now in a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling water. And Element has formulated the perfect amount of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and zero sugar to keep you hydrated. And the right amount of electrolytes can help you maintain steady energy, improve cognitive function, have fewer headaches and muscle cramps, and also keep your skin hydrated. And the sparkling flavors include citrus salt, watermelon salt, grapefruit salt, as well as the debut of the new black cherry lime flavor, only available in sparkling. So if you're interested in checking out the drink mix packets or the new sparkling, go to drinklmnt.com/BamaBass, and you can get a free Element sample pack with any order by using the link in the video description. And each sample pack includes 1 packet of 8 flavors. But the best part is they have a no questions asked refund policy. So do me a favor, go check them out and join the Salty Rebellion. Now let's check on the fish post front. And this is pretty much what I would expect. So those bass feed heavily before the snow and during it, but after a big front moves through, they're nowhere to be found. The only fish I can spot out of all of them that live in this pond is one of the little bass tucked in as tight as you can get right there beneath that rock. And that's probably where they're going to stay the next few days until it warms up. But man, you gotta love it. Definitely the coolest looking spot on the property. I'm soaking it all in. I wish it would snow more often. So we got a little bit more frozen water right here in the shallow pocket, but overall not too bad. And again, the eagle nest completely full of snow. Here's a good look at the shop, roof covered in snow, but everything held up fine. And shout out to Starlink, they actually built in heaters that you can activate during snow to melt it off so it doesn't interrupt your service. Alright, back here at the backyard pond, and it didn't fare as well as Cedar Falls. A good portion of the surface area is covered in ice, but we do still have flowing water coming down from the waterfall. Hopefully that's helping out, because I sure would hate to see Moby frozen solid. We got Mr. Oliver out here building his first ever snowman. He was pretty excited about it. But Sarah needed a little bit more of a thrill, so we rigged her up a little sled and pulled her around the farm. And the only thing she would say is, faster, faster. Little daredevil. Alright, this little guy's already out hunting this morning, and I was pretty surprised to see how easy it was to see where all the wildlife moved right after the snow. And as we're flying the drone over, all those little trails that you can see down there are deer and wild game tracks. So I was even able to fly around the farm and learn where these deer are coming out of the woods at, and the routes that they're taking from their bedding area to their feeding areas, which is something I've never been able to do in the past. And we even had some cool tracks like this, which I'm guessing are either the owl or eagle. You can see the claws or talons right there. And the reason you know it was a bird is because that's the only track around it, except for we have one more over there in the beach area. A couple deer tracks, and you can tell by the distance between them, these guys were running from something. But one of the most heavily populated areas was right over here by one of these pine trees I planted a few months ago. And you could see all the deer routed through this area, and even some bucks rubbing on those tree limbs. Now we're down here in one of the most populated wildlife areas, the half acre where we always feed them. And it's no surprise that it's covered in tracks. And they've even eaten through the snow in some places to get the food. So now let's talk about a few of the problems that the cold weather and snow cause. As you all know, the tilapia cannot survive when the water temps get beneath 55 degrees. So they get very lethargic, and the bass eat a lot of the small ones, and the bigger ones get left for the buzzards and eagles. You can always tell when it's getting close to being that time. The buzzards start to hover around, and if you look closely, one of those guys is pretending to be a buzzard, but you didn't fool us. Mr. Eagle in there with the white head and white tail. So while I do hate it that the tilapia don't survive the winters, it is one of the most active times for the bald eagles, and I love to film them and even watch the new ones that show up, like this younger eagle, which I believe is called a sub-adult. His head is close to fully white, but not quite there yet, which I think makes him around 4.5 to 5.5 years old. And he flew over the pond this past week, and as soon as he saw the tilapia, he hasn't left since. He keeps snagging them and bringing them up into a tree, or sometimes he'll actually just eat them right there on the bank. But as you all know, eagles can get a little bit territorial. If you look at the top of the power pole there on the left, that's one of the permanent eagles that has lived here the past year, and I believe it's the male, and I don't think he's too happy with this young guy showing up at his fishing hole. So let's see how this plays out. He tolerated it for a little bit, but then he had to fly down and let him know exactly what he thought about it. They got into a little sparring fight, and it's too bad the wind was howling and we didn't capture the audio, because he was letting them have it. So he basically pushed the young guy off into the pond, and then claimed his fish, and you can tell there's not much the young guy wants to do about it. But luckily for them, there's an abundance of tilapia to choose from. So after just a little while, the little guy flew off, and man, look at that. I'm always impressed with their wingspan. And after Daddy Eagle got done eating, he walked over to the pond for a sip of water. And I wish we could tag eagles like we do the fish, because I would love to know if that younger eagle was one of their offspring. Because just like many others out in nature, as they get older, they get kicked out of the nest. Then it's each man for himself. But here's another really cool shot of Papa Eagle flying over the Crimson Oak Pond with a belly full of tilapia. Now let's take a look at some of the other guys that showed up during the storm. Love the colors on that little guy. And watch how this one fluffs his feathers out to help stay warm on this cold, frigid morning. And the crow shows up, and this scene reminds me of old guys sitting around a coffee shop talking about the weather, probably getting ready for the spring. And another one of our favorite little guys, the kingfisher, he's happy that hunting season's back open. And I showed you a quick glimpse of Hooter the owl, but he's been visiting the Eagle Tower pretty regularly, especially at night. That's when he hunts a lot. But as I mentioned in the previous videos, if the eagles don't take over the nest, we would love for Hooter or Al Capone to take over and have some baby owls. We've seen a nest just like this in an osprey tower down at the beach that the owls nested in and raised up 2 babies. So I know it's possible, but I'll have to do a little more research on when their breeding season is, because we may have missed out on it. Alright, now let's talk about another problem we're having when we launch the boat into the pond. So the past 2 times when I launch it, the tires kind of sink down in the clay, and then when I pull the trailer out, the tires are caked in clay, which has me concerned that eventually we may damage that clay liner and cause a leak. You can see how much everything gets stirred up. So I'm looking for a solution to this, and I think there's a couple out there, but I wanted to see what you guys thought and if you have any experience with this. So right here in this area, a lot of water drains into the pond, so in the past we put the felt liners down and the rock to kind of keep everything in place. But I'm worried that if we use any rock, it's just going to smush it down into the clay and not help at all. So something I've seen videos of in the past is they'll actually pour the concrete slab onto the bank, wait for it to dry out, and then they'll use a big piece of machinery to push the ramp down into the water, kind of like you see in this photo. And that would be a potential solution, but I'm worried that when we push the concrete into the pond, it may damage the clay layer, so I'm not sure if that'll work. Another option is using something like a hybrid ramp, where you pour the concrete, but also use something like big logs down the side of it, so the trailer tires just roll down the logs, and that provides that buffer between the tire and the clay. So that is another potential solution. I've even heard people talk about pouring concrete slabs underwater, but the last thing I want to do is introduce any new chemicals that may harm the fish, so that's out. So if you guys have any other potential solutions, leave it in a comment down below. Let's see if we can get us a boat ramp built. Now let's check in on another problem we have with our pond aerator and compressor. First of all, I was shocked that all 3 of our air lines froze during the storm, and we weren't getting any bubbles out until they thawed out. But the second problem we're having is our compressor post has fallen over, and if you take a look at it, I'm not sure if something has eaten through the wood, or just the moisture right there where it makes contact with the ground has rotted the post out. But it surprised me because it's only been installed for 2 years. So I came back with a 6x6 treated post. We'll see if this one holds up any longer. Alright, we were hoping to make a little more progress with the shop. The snow set us back just a little bit, but the framers were able to come in and get started on the interior portion of the shop. They're framing out the walls and the ceilings. We should have a little bit more to show you on this in the next video. So we hadn't got the shop sealed off with the spray foam yet, and we had a few new visitors during the snowstorm. These little guys wanted to get out of the snow in the cold weather, and that's those same blackbirds I was telling you about. So a flock of them flew in, and they are the most aggressive feeders I've ever seen. It's like they could sense the snow was about to cover the ground, and all they do is eat. All day long. They have incredible appetites. Anywhere we had bird food out, they attacked it. Like little scavengers. But they are friendly little guys, and it's interesting they're not really scared of human interaction. You can walk right up beside them. They don't seem to mind you that much. But speaking of preparing for the snowstorm, Gus Gus was proactive and started building his nest before the front hit. He was bringing little limbs and branches and setting them over there by the bed, and doing his best to warm his little paws up. And if you recall, there was a little bit of a showdown between Gus Gus and the squirrel we called Chip in the last video. Chip came in one day and ran little Gus Gus out, but it turned out that Chip was actually doing him a favor because it was the first time we had ever seen this cat show up to the house. And luckily Gus Gus wasn't there that day. But Gus Gus's fortune wasn't always going to be so lucky, because the next time the cat showed up, Gus Gus was relaxing in the bed, and then it became the Tom and Jerry showdown. But I give Gus Gus a lot of credit because the very first thing he did was knock out the window so he would have another point of exit. But watch how smart he is. Rather than just leaving his shelter and being exposed to the cat, he actually plays a real-life game of cat and mouse. So he sits there and waits for the cat to make his next move, knowing that the cat's going to either have to commit and come all the way in the house, or wait on him to come out. And you can see the cat is in a big dilemma. And these guys are playing a game of chess here, but I don't blame them because after all, it is a matter of life and death for Gus Gus. So this went on for quite a while, and eventually Gus Gus escaped out the window, leaving the cat empty-handed. And you can tell he wasn't too pleased about it, so he basically decided to post up right on the front porch, waiting on Gus Gus to return. And after waiting there all day, and even coming back and checking in at night, he finally realized he lost this battle. But look who shows up the next day, and Chip comes in, and check him out investigating all the evidence from the showdown the day before. He can tell something's went down here, things are out of place, and I think he can even smell it. He's not sure what happened, but he's inspecting every inch of the house, making sure there's not any leftover stash. And look who shows back up a couple nights later, Gus Gus making a return to his home and nest. And he even checks to make sure the window's still open and that the getaway's still there just in case he needs it. And we're starting to show some early signs of the rut, and you can tell by every tree that you stop by, including this pine tree we planted earlier this year, is all roughed up from the bucks marking their territory. So I decided to grab the camera and go sit up in the ladder stand that we installed earlier this year. But I can tell a little guy named Chip's been eating all of his acorns here. Man, it really is a beautiful view up here. I can see about 40 acres of the farm. Got the camera out here with me. Should start seeing some activity pretty soon. And just to the right here is the pond dam. And that's the little pine tree that the buck was rubbing on. And right on cue, probably 5 minutes after I got in the stand, the deer started coming out right beneath me. The first one's one of those little fawns. And I've had several people ask questions in the video comments about if we were ever going to hunt out here at the farm. And to be honest, after filming these deer all year long, they're much more like pets to me than wild animals. So I'm personally not ever going to hunt out here. And so my goal is to just plant enough crops to feed the deer population. We also feed them the soybeans, corn, and other mixtures throughout the year. And so far, the area has not gotten overpopulated. We got 60 acres of planted fields right now, and that keeps them happy throughout those winter months when the other food sources are scarce. But if you'll notice right here, these two does are getting suspicious, and what they're actually looking at is some other deer that are coming out directly beneath my stand. So I had to pull out a second camera to film these guys because they snuck up on me, and this little one's probably only 10 yards away from the ladder. But at this point, I'm hearing several footsteps, and I know there's a whole group of them coming up. And I'm just out here in street clothes, didn't do anything for scent protection, because I wasn't expecting the deer to be this close to me. So now you're going to get to see what a deer does when they know you're in the area. So the first thing they do is stomp their foot to alert the other deer, and then they do a really loud blow. And that's basically a siren to all the other whitetail to let them know something's not right. And the funny thing is, this deer in the front that's stomping its feet is actually smelling my exact foot tracks from where I walked into the stand. And whitetail have an incredible nose. You're not going to get much past them. But I wanted to see how these deer would react, especially to my smell, because I'm out here all the time, feeding them, walking through these areas. But somehow they know this scent is too fresh, and they're on to me. But I think that the other deer being out in the field helped ease their minds. And eventually they walk on by. I can even see the duck house over in the pond, and the kingfisher just caught him another shad. So the tree stands in a pretty good spot because I had about a dozen deer walk directly beneath it. And they were all basically a repeat of the one before, stomping their way by. And right before dark, the activity picked up, and across the field it looked like there's an injured deer that's got a little hobble. But that's why I love this camera. It's tough to beat that zoom. And when the sun started going down, everywhere you looked, there were deer. But if you'll notice, pretty much all of them are does or little fawns, which is a very good indicator that the rut's not started yet. And the little fawns out there playing around just as happy as can be. So I'll try to do this again in a couple of weeks, because when the bucks are rutting and chasing does around, it's very interesting to watch. And now I see why all the deer were hanging out directly beneath the stand. Acorns everywhere. Alright, now we're continuing our fishing trip during the winter storm. Guys, you see the rod tips are freezing. Don't know how long we're going to make it out here, but hey, if the big ones are biting, gotta at least tough it out for a little while. Got him. Feels like another good one. Yes, sir. Out here on that wintertime snow bite. Something we don't get that often. Good fish, too. Got him. Alright, this fish has been caught. 233382. 3382. And it weighs 2.27 pounds. And this fish was named Quicksilver, and we caught him for the first time just a month ago, but I'm thinking we had an issue with the scale then because he measured 1/4 pound less than that this time, and it's very unlikely that a fish loses that much weight in just a few weeks. There we go. Right at the bank. Little guy. Alright, this fish has been caught. 570318. And it weighs 1.41 pounds. So every time I get a chance, I try to put the boat in and use some of the electronics to learn about the bass in the pond, see how much bait we have in here, and figure out where they're hanging out. And right here you can see we got some big bait balls hanging out around 6 to 7 feet deep. And I've also been playing around with a live scope, which I'll have to admit is a cheat code when it comes to fishing. You can literally see the individual fish swimming in real time, throw your lure out there, watch it sink down, wiggle it right in front of his face, and just like that, it's that easy. Got it. There we go. Right up under the trolling motor. That's a good one though. Got him. Sitting there watching it on the graph. Man, that's a beauty of a fish right there. Caught it directly under the boat. Alright, this one's 570285. And it weighs 3.61 pounds. Big one. And 17.5 inches. This fish was named Peanut, another one of the original bass we stocked in the pond. 4th time we caught it, and 120% relative weight. That's exactly what you want to see. But I got a couple fishing buddies out here with me. Sarah learning how to drive the trolling motor, all while Oliver thinks he's steering the boat. Win-win for everybody. Alright, now let's check in on some of the swamp cameras, and you can tell that the rut is getting close when you start seeing the bucks on their feet during daylight. We got Chip hanging out on a cypress root, staying away from all the squirrel house drama, and a raccoon out feeding at night. And another young buck passing through the area for the first time. Then he decides to take a swim at night. It's a little bit deeper than he thought it would be. More signs of early rutting action. Bucks will explore new grounds and travel miles and miles away from home during the rut. We got a little Spike moving around, checking out all the snow. But I think he's on to us. And I'll have to say that watching the whitetails was probably one of my favorite things to watch the couple days after it snowed. Their coats are built for it, and they seem to be right at home, and not really phased at all. Alright, we set up one other trail camera on a scrape, and I wanted to see which bucks were coming through and refreshing the scrape each night. There's one of those young spikes. And this looks like a potential candidate. He knew where the scrape was, but too bad it's covered in snow. Another nice buck walking by, but not the one doing the scraping. And George Jones the possum always finds a way to get filmed. And check out this though, not really sure what's going on here. And a few does trekking through the snow, and a few more stopping by the scrape area. And a buck hot on their trail, and lost them. I think we're probably 1 week away from the rut, so over the next couple weeks we should get to see some really cool whitetail action. One last shot of the squirrel house while they were waiting on the snow to thaw out. Alright, just spread some G&D Rack Attack. So far it's the #1 attractant for bringing in bucks versus does. And we busted up those pumpkins over there to see if the deer will come out and eat them now. Alright, not too surprising, the first ones to show up are the mama and little guys. And then at night the whole herd comes in. Bucks are still in a bachelor group, and he's even bucking the other one out of the way. And we got the little raccoon family stopping by. And he's bucking another one away. He really likes this stuff. And hey, look who it is, the family down there, replenishing the deer food. And Mr. George Jones making his rounds. This is the night that it flooded and washed all their food down into the swamp. The bucks are starting to come out, but still no chasing activity. But he is curious about the raccoon. And let's see if they'll share. Yep, looks like these two guys share, and he's not bucking him away. I'm not so sure if this Spike has ever seen a raccoon. He's not quite sure what to think about him. And this little fawn looks like he has for sure never seen a raccoon. Look at that little face of curiosity. There's a good daytime shot of him, wondering when the next batch is coming. Been out here freezing all day, now it's time to cook a hot meal to end the day. And I hope you guys enjoyed the snowstorm as much as I did. But if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along with all the ponds, tiger bass, and other wildlife out here at the farm. Hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.